Think about this. You lived an entire, vivid life before you turned 3. You tasted new foods, took your first wobbly steps, heard your mom's voice, maybe even said your very first word. And you remember absolutely none of it. It's totally gone. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're diving deep into one of the most universal and honestly kind of bizarre mysteries of the human experience.
Now, most people just assume the answer to this missing chunk of time is pretty simple, right? They figure the baby brain just wasn't ready yet, like the hardware was just too young to hit the record button. But here's the thing. That is completely incorrect. The real answer to your missing early life is so much stranger, because your baby brain wasn't failing to record your experiences at all. It was recording absolutely everything. Your memories were definitely there, but something stepped in and actively destroyed them.
So, to really understand what happened to your past, we need to put a name to exactly what we're looking at here. It's called infantile amnesia. That's the official scientific term for this strange black hole in all of our pasts. The term was actually first coined by Sigmund Freud way back in 1905. And the very existence of this term sets up our first major clue for today's explainer, which is the fact that babies actually do form memories, completely contrary to what most people believe.
Okay, so let's dive right into this with Section 1, Proof that Babies Remember.
Because before we can figure out what destroyed the memories, we have to prove babies can actually form them in the first place, right? So let me walk you through this incredibly elegant experiment from the 1980s by psychologist Carolyn Rovi Collier at Rutgers University. The setup was just so simple but genius. Step 1, they tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a colorful mobile hanging right above their crib. In Step 2, the babies quickly learn that kicking their leg makes the mobile move, and they absolutely love it. What baby doesn't love a little property destruction? But the real magic happens in Step 3. When researchers brought those exact same babies back days later, they remembered. They started kicking immediately. Even 2-month-old babies held onto that memory for days, and 6-month-old babies remembered the trick for weeks. So the hardware works. Infant brains can, for sure, learn and store information. Which, of course, brings us to a massive, glaring question. If babies can remember, and we know for an absolute fact they do, where do those memories go? Why is every single trace of them completely wiped clean by the time we reach adulthood? Well, to solve this, we need to interrogate the very first biological suspect in our mystery.
That brings us to Section 2, Growth Destroys Your Old Memories.
To understand why these memories vanish, we literally have to look at the physical brain itself. When we compare an adult brain directly to an infant brain, a huge biological difference pops up. In adults, the hippocampus, which is basically the engine of your memory, works with the prefrontal cortex to tag, store, and retrieve long-term episodes. But in infants, this system is severely underdeveloped. The physical connections between these regions, they're still under construction. Specifically, there's this critical gateway region called the dentate gyrus, and it simply isn't fully wired up until somewhere between ages 2 and 4. So your infant brain was forming short-term memories just fine, but it physically lacked the fully wired infrastructure to transport those experiences into permanent long-term storage. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is a fascinating concept called neurogenesis. That's just a fancy word for the rapid production of new neurons in the brain. Back in 2014, 2 neuroscientists in Toronto, Sheena Jocelyn and Paul Franklin, made a huge discovery involving neurogenesis that basically upended everything we thought we knew about early memory.
Let's break down their groundbreaking experiment, which was actually published in the journal Science. They knew that during the first years of life, a baby's hippocampus is producing new neurons at just an extraordinary rate. It's busy building the brain. But they suspected this building process had a cost, so they tested it out on mice. When they artificially increased neurogenesis, meaning they sped up neuron growth in adult mice, a crazy thing happened. Those adult mice started forgetting things they had previously learned. And when they intentionally slowed down neurogenesis in infant mice, those infants held onto their memories much longer than normal. This revealed a deeply, deeply counterintuitive truth.
There's just a perfect metaphor for what was happening inside your head. Your earliest experiences weren't lost because they were never saved. They were lost because your brain kept building new rooms and tearing down the old walls in the process. I love that. Your baby brain wasn't too weak, it was just way too busy growing. Every single time a new neuron integrated into an existing circuit to build up your brain, it disrupted the delicate connections that were already there. The very process of building your mind was actively destroying your memories.
Moving right along, we have Section 3, the birth of the self.
But biology is really only half of the story here.
Because to form what we call an autobiographical memory, you need something so basic you probably take it completely for granted. You need a sense of self. Developmental psychologists Mark Howe and Mary Courage demonstrated this beautifully in the late 1990s with the mirror test. Step 1, they'd put a harmless little dot of rouge on a baby's nose. Step 2, place them right in front of a mirror. And step 3, just watch what happens. Before 18 months of age, babies treat the reflection like it's a completely different child. They just don't recognize it. But after 18 to 24 months, they finally reach for the mark on their own face. The birth of self-recognition has officially occurred.
The absolutely crucial point here is this. There was no you yet. A massive reason you can't remember being a baby is because early on, there was literally no continuous narrator inside your head. There was no distinct main character there to package all those daily experiences into a neat personal story that belonged to someone named you.
Let's move on and see how this builds in Section 4, how language structures the past. Because even with a newly developed sense of self, you still need a way to organize your reality. I absolutely love this quote from developmental psychologist Catherine Nelson's research. She says, "Language gives memory a skeleton. Without it, experiences are like water with no container." Think about that for a second. Before you had words, your daily life was encoded as raw, unfiltered sensory impressions. We're talking just sounds, textures, emotions, light. But without a vocabulary to actually organize and categorize them, those impressions had no framework to attach to. They existed vividly in the moment, for sure, but then they just slipped away like water.
We can actually see this perfectly in the data collected by psychologist Qi Wang at Cornell. The average age of a person's earliest memory actually changes depending on their culture. For example, in Western cultures, where parents constantly narrate experiences and ask kids questions about their day, early memories tend to start around age 3.5. But look at the Maori culture of New Zealand. They have this incredibly rich oral tradition that places massive emphasis on personal history and storytelling, and their average first memories reach all the way back to age 2.5. Meanwhile, in some East Asian cultures where early narratives focus a bit less on the individual, memories often don't stick until age 4 or even later. So the cultural emphasis on language and storytelling literally shapes how far back your brain can reach. It's a real game changer.
And finally, bringing it all together, we have Section 5, Becoming Who You Are Today.
So, it's time to bring all of these fascinating clues together. Ultimately, what happened to you was a perfect storm of forgetting. Infantile amnesia isn't caused by one single failure. It's caused by everything all at once. Your hippocampus physically wasn't wired for long-term storage yet. A massive flood of new neurons literally overwrote your fragile early memory circuits. You had no continuous concept of self to anchor your experiences. And on top of it all, you lacked the language to provide a surviving structure to your sensory inputs. It all combines to create this black hole in the past of every single human being on Earth. But hey, the big takeaway here really shouldn't be about loss. It should be about transformation. Your brain was doing something far, far more important than remembering. It was becoming you. Becoming the exact person you are today quite literally required destroying the neural pathways of the person who came before. Your brain had to tear down the scaffolding to build the masterpiece.
Which leaves us with this final, profoundly unsettling question to end our explainer on today. When you look at an old photo of yourself as an infant, is that baby actually you? Or is it someone else entirely? Someone who lived in the very same body, but whose mind was completely disassembled and rebuilt neuron by neuron to create the person you are right now? It's a pretty wild thought to take with you today. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the science behind who we are, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.